Welcome back to today's episode of Unapologetic Living. I'm Elizabeth Elliott and I am your hostess, and I am excited to share Laura Davison with you. I met Laura through the internet. Uh,
Yeah,
and I was intrigued by the name of her Instagram handle, which is Good Girl Syndrome Coach or the Good Girl Syndrome Coach. And I know you are a Good Girl Syndrome uh, coach.
that's right. Yes, that's
Um,
me.
and I know that I think many women can fall prey to becoming that good girl, right? And I say in quotes, all these things that we're supposed to do to be that good girl or be accepted
Yeah,
or loved.
100%. Yes. And
And
guys can get it too. It's like good girl syndrome is kind of a series of traits or behaviors, but typically women have suffered from it more, I suppose, but guys definitely get it as well. So I have coached guys with those too.
so before we hear your story,
Mm.
because I like for my guests to share their story, what are some of those traits? So,
Yeah, so there's kind of six key ones. So it's like a series of kind of beliefs and behaviors, and it's basically the massive one is people pleasing, perfectionism, weak boundaries, seeking external validation. So, really kind of that permission, approval before you make any decisions, anything like that. Overextending yourself, your responsibilities. So, always trying to be the fixer and the one's like, I'll do it, kind of taking everything on for everybody else. And also, really, the person that kind of suppresses your emotions. So, even if you feel like, oh, it's not okay, you're just like, okay, thank you. And don't speak up and stand up and say what you actually feel because you're worried it's going to cause trouble or you'll be seen as difficult or seen as, someone being a rebel or being awkward or whatever. And it's just that kind of this need to conform. I guess that's where people have been really conditioned. It's like, sit down, be quiet, say nothing, stay in your place, don't, be polite, be considerate. And it becomes so self-editing that by the time you're an adult, you don't need the rules anymore. You're just kind of following this old rule book that keeps you so trapped in like a shell of who you really are. And you just kind of, that's what I help my clients with, is breaking that rule book and getting out to being back to being who you really are.
and that can take some unpacking.
Yes, you can for sure. For sure. Yeah. Because it's different for every person. It depends what their sort of experience of it is. And it doesn't just show up like, oh, I'm a people pleaser at the end. It's like this leads to overwhelm, anxiety, stress, burnout, procrastination, especially for the perfectionists. It can be kind of lack of an ability to make a decision. So there's lots of different things that self-doubt, obviously, like a kind of low self-worth, not being able to say no without feeling like you have to justify yourself or explain. So it's all those sorts of things where you hear these things that people say like, oh, I do this, or you kind of recognize it and you're like, oh, that's got a root cause. And I think people have, well, this is where I kind of came to with my coaching, was like where I was seeing people trying to deal with all of these different separate problems, like, oh, I procrastinate, I just need time management, or I need more motivation, or oh, I just really worry about what people think. But and they were treating them all as these separate things. It's like it's all the same root cause. Is that like you feel scared to be you and feel that you wouldn't be loved and accepted and allowed to kind of be you in that way. So
Yeah. So now you have a personal story with this, I'm guessing.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. The kind of main thing is that it comes from your societal norms, education, religion, media, all that stuff. That kind of family obviously will shape a lot of people. I definitely, my personal story was I was like the OG good girl. I just believed it was such a necessary badge of honor. I went to a private all girls school that was very like Victorian. It was very, kind of like grey uniforms, very strict, it was just everything was like you have to get A's, you have to be kind of this really high achiever, you have to do everything to the highest standards. And it was just kind of like nothing less is really acceptable. And I totally at some point like drank that Kool-Aid. I just sort of was like, yeah, I need to do everything right and be perfect. And it took me a really, really long time. I'd say all through my 20s, I was kind of in London working in the corporate world. It wasn't really a great fit. It wasn't making me happy in the jobs I was in. I was always feeling a bit unfulfilled and a bit like, oh, I feel like I should stay here because everyone else I've been to university with has gone to London and got the big corporate job and has the handbags and has the things and like all these kind of tick boxes of I'm doing well, I'm succeeding, and this would make everyone proud. And there was a part of me that was like, I don't really want any of this, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I do want, and I feel like I just have to wait this out until I've sort of done my time or proved that, I felt like I would be a real failure if I said, I actually just don't really want to play this game anymore. And I was really waiting for that permission, that approval for someone to say, it's fine, you can leave, you can do whatever. And I kind of got to 30, 31, and I guess everyone was going down the route of mortgages and marriages and all these things. And I was like, I don't really want to do any of that either. I'm just really feeling so lost because I was like, am I behind? Am I wrong? What's wrong with me? What have I done wrong? I feel like I was doing everything right. So why am I still kind of misunderstood or a misfit or, all of these questions in my mind. And I just decided or kind of had this breakthrough moment of like, I need to stop, take control. Like nobody is coming to give me this kind of Hail Mary, this free pass. Be like, you can stop whenever you want. I have to decide that myself. So I quit everything and booked a flight to Argentina, which was totally random. I'd never been there before, but I was like, I just need to go somewhere new and different and try something different and just push myself out of my comfort zone. And it was the best reset ever because I went somewhere where there were no expectations of me. I was just Laura from England, and no one was kind of saying, oh, you sound like you're from this area, or oh, well, you don't look like someone from this area, or you don't dress this way, or I wouldn't expect that to be. So I wasn't being put into boxes that didn't fit. I was feeling like totally free to just be accepted as just me. And obviously that was just for like a month. So I had to go back to England after that. And I was like, I need to find a way now to bring this into my life because it kind of changed my mindset to say, okay, I actually am the person not accepting myself to just be me and just, break out of all these boxes I was trying to kind of fit into and be like the good girl that does this and that this is what's expected of me here and blah, blah, blah. So that really was such a life-changing trip. It really made me realize like, oh, I can just be accepted for being just me as I am, like not meeting anyone else's expectations or requirements or standards. It's like I'm good as I am, I'm okay. And so yeah, then I had this plan of I really want to leave London, leave corporate. I really wanted to move back to Argentina on a long-term basis, but I didn't speak Spanish, didn't know anyone there other than the family I'd stayed with, like didn't have any way of supporting myself or anything. And I guess through kind of COVID and all these different things, like the world was just changed so much in those few years. And I retrained as a coach, quit my corporate job, packed up my apartment in London. And yeah, and now I live in the countryside in England for a few months a year, and the rest of the time I'm in Buenos Aires in Argentina. So I made it happen, but it was a long road for me to get there because I didn't have basically someone like me saying it's okay, you can do it, these things are all possible. I was going against the grain wildly of everyone else saying that's completely insane, that's crazy, Like, why would you do that? That doesn't make sense. It's going to fail horribly. What are you thinking? Do you need help? And it's like, no, I think I'm really good. Um, but it was kind of actually saying, okay, being this good girl is actually working against me now. And, not that I need to go and be some kind of crazy, like extreme opposite end of that, but just saying I don't need to hide who I am and suppress and not say how I feel and not kind of follow my own heart and recognize that we all have different paths and we're all allowed to find our own way and do our own things for our own reasons, so and not have to explain yourself or defend yourself to people. So yeah, it's that's my kind of little background of it. It's like my personal experience. So I definitely am so passionate about letting other people know that there is another way. And it's not necessarily leaving corporate or leaving where you live, or, my life change was pretty radical. But for most people, it's just kind of this mindset opening to see like, oh, I'm not wrong. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. I'm not the problem. I haven't done something wrong to find myself in this place. It's just the way that the world is set up and the way that the media and all of these things and societal norms, expectations, institutions that we grow up in, and a lot of times like family models, it's kind of really hard. You really subconsciously absorbing all the time these ideals and standards and expectations, like, oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, like, is that a good idea? And you're like, oh, okay, and you just start kind of self containing and correcting all the time. It takes a lot to kind of break that and just be like, actually, what do I want and what do I care about and what are my values for me? And that's not selfish, and that's not being a bad person, and that's not being like harmful to other people for me to just be happy, So yeah, it's kind
So
of finding that.
you said you were around 31 when you booked that first trip to Argentina.
That's right. Yeah.
And when was that?
So that was 2017, so 8 years ago. So I just turned
I know.
39 on Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be difficult to
Mm,
turn off those messages, uh,
hugely. Yeah.
especially when it comes from family and community, religious institutions.
Mm,
You're just sort of indoctrinated into this is the way, and
yeah.
media, and I don't know if it's you're in London.
I'm out of London now, so I'm in the countryside. Yeah.
Uh, so you're in London, and um, we're in the United States, and I don't know if the message is similar, but definitely when I was growing up, and I'm 47, there was sort of an order of operations.
Mm,
You graduate high school, you go on to college. I don't know, maybe you get married and then get a job or get a job and then get married, where you buy your
yeah,
house, you have your kids or get your dog,
exactly.
and you check these boxes off just because that's about what everybody else is doing and what everybody else has also been sort of conditioned to do.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And
Uh,
that's scary to go against that grain. I mean, that wasn't a really conscious choice that I was like, I don't want to get married or anything. It was just more like, oh, I'm having a really good time just living my life and doing whatever, having fun. And then I was sort of like, oh, I haven't really met someone, but I wasn't feeling that pressure for me in terms of the way that some of my friends, I think, were very much like, I'm turning 30, put a ring on my finger now. Or, I wasn't feeling that, but it's weird, even though that wasn't my value system, I still was then being kind of questioned or judged a little bit by certain people. And I think just it makes other people feel uncomfortable when you don't conform. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day that I was like, actually, I've really learned to reframe this now when people ask, to think that they're just asking out of curiosity, not out of judgment, and to not start defending myself and be like, well, the reason I did this is da, 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 da. But I think for a while it was painful going to parties and things where people were like, oh, why, where's your house? Where's your boyfriend? Where's your husband? I was like, oh, I just don't need one like today. It's like I'm also a whole person by myself and on my own timeline. And you don't have to do all these things, kind of by a certain date or in a certain order. And, I think there are plenty of people when you actually look really in the media, there's plenty of people who've got married and divorced and married again, or, had children before marriage or lost a job and then had like made millions, lost millions. Like people do things all in and out of order. It's not very often that people kind of tick all of these boxes in the exact timeline and order and then just like I've completed life, now I will ride out the next 60 years of like done. It's like life doesn't work that way. So we
Yeah, no,
all have our different tapestries.
no. And I always kind of said, life happens while you're making other plans.
Exactly.
Um, and that, uh, for me, I mean, I definitely didn't, although I don't even know if it was expected. It was just kind of what I've been taught. It wasn't like something that was uh, even, drilled into me growing up.
Mm,
My parents were kind of liberal.
yeah.
Uh, they never really said, I don't really feel like they left a message one way or another on how things were supposed to go, right, in the direction. But th- even the school systems, I think, teach this is what you're doing. You're working towards
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And this is good, this is bad, this is
Yeah.
success, this is failure. And it's very, very like basic, and it's very kind of like one end or the other. There's very little scope for all of the gray in between, and life is just living in the gray. Like it's very rare, unless you're doing like something super illegal. It's very rare that something is like, this is okay, this is not okay. Most stuff, people will have their views, and that will be, sometimes religious things will influence that, or political, things, or family, whatever. Or, certain cultures, may frown on certain things that other ones would be more open-minded to. But that's not right or wrong either. It's just like everyone is doing what they have been told is the right thing to do. And it takes, a different mind sometimes to say, oh, I wonder why we're doing it that way. Like, I just don't really want to do it that way. And it's not purposefully saying like, I'm going to break the system and go against it. It's just like that system doesn't really work for me. We're all humans, we're all made differently, we all have different, needs and wants and dreams and goals. Like you cannot possibly all be doing everything on the same timeline. Like the world would be insane if that was the case, and
Yeah.
really boring as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think of that story. I don't know. It's about, the daughter talking to her mother about baking a cake and using a square pan,
Mm-hmm.
and well, why do we have to use the square pan? Well, that's what your grandmother did. And that's
Yeah,
what your great
exactly.
grandmother did. Well, maybe I want a round pan.
Yeah, I know.
Like, and then you actually hopefully are given the freedom to like explore the round pan, but it's just like it's just like just generationally passed down and
Exactly.
oftentimes with no rhyme or reason as to why.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of that is, if you go back to sort of caveman levels of just fitting into a tribe, or not fitting in, but belonging and being sort of accepted and having that survival and safety and all of these things. And so much of what all of us are doing with that conditioning is just like, that would be really unsafe to go outside, what we have set as the parameters of normality. And that would be like, what will happen? It's like, well, actually, nothing bad will really happen. But people are really worried, and they're worried about being judged, and they're worried about failing, and they're worried about being rejected from families, communities, relationships, friendships, jobs, all these things. Like, oh, if I show up as I really am and I say what I really think, I'm not saying go into your boss and be like, I hate your haircut or something, but just kind of, if someone is asking you, what do you need in this relationship, or what do you look for in this job or something, there's no point in you saying, yep, that's totally fine, and none of it being fine with you, because you're going to be the person that suffers from that long term. You're going to be just keeping everybody else's peace basically at the cost of your own. And you're going to end up in relationships that aren't fulfilling, jobs that aren't fulfilling, you know, families, we can't always choose them, but there's a lot of different things with friendships, life choices in general. If you're not following, if you don't know what your values are and what really matters to you, and sort of what your real non-negotiables are, and you don't believe that actually you deserve to have that choice, and your choice is valid, as valid as anybody else's, and your feelings are valid, and your opinions are valid, and your fears are valid. It's like, if you don't have clarity on those things, that's, you're always going to be kind of easily swayed or kind of manipulated by somebody else who is clear on what they want and will just use you to get there. So you have to be in the driving seat of your own car, basically, of your own life, for sure.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we don't know what those non-negotiables are until we're right there in the middle of a situation.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And also, I think one massive thing I would say is like, this is not something to be ashamed of or feel guilty for or think there's something wrong with you, because I think this is, I mean, I call it the good girl guilt, but this is kind of the base of what's holding people into these, stuck in these old patterns, these old cycles of beliefs, because they feel so much like I should be doing this, or it's probably just me, or there's something wrong with me, or like I'm the weird one in the family, or I don't think the way that everyone else in my family or my group, my school group, or my church, or whatever, my community. I don't feel the same way, or don't think the same way. Or if people are invalidating you and saying, well, you just need to toughen up, you're being too sensitive, so don't cry. Or, you need to think about everyone else because it's not all about you. And, oh, you need to be prioritizing everyone else's needs. Or, there's a lot where we are from an early age, like education, religion especially, they definitely push kind of a community aspect rather than individual values. It's really hard to get to an adult point and then say, oh, what do I care about, and really really know that it's important to you. And you're right, sometimes it's not to have your feet to the fire that you're like, oh, I just now realized that I've been sort of sleepwalking through my life, or kind of being like a passenger a little bit in someone else's life, because I'm not quite sure, like I haven't been actively making these decisions through the lens of my own choices and values.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend this morning, and I knew our conversation was this afternoon. And she was sharing with me about a family vacation
Mm-hmm.
she takes with in-laws, her mother and father-in-law, and then also her husband's family, and and how this might be the last one,
Oh,
not for any negative reason, but things are shifting as kids grow up and different
yeah.
people are coming and some aren't coming. And um, she and her husband were putting on their shoes to take a walk, which they thought was just going to be them. And then uh, his brother's wife was like, "Oh, you're going on a walk? Okay." Let me grab my shoes. And, you know, that's fine, right? But she was like, he and I were just kind of thinking we were going to go out, right? And take our walk,
Yeah,
get like just an hour with the two of us because we're totally submersed in family.
yeah,
And, I could hear it in her, right? That she should just let her join,
yeah,
right? And that's where I think like it's these tiny things
exactly.
and losing our voice in that, hey, we'd really just like an hour together. You
Yeah,
you can't come.
yeah.
And guess what? That's okay.
That is okay. And I was saying this yesterday to another client that was telling me, I've we've been working on things for her job and sort of asking for what you need. And she was saying, I can't communicate well. And I said, no, you do. You communicate very well, very clearly, very articulate, but you don't feel that you can communicate your needs. And then she said this week, oh, well, I tried to communicate, I told my boss I need this. And then she said, oh, I don't know if we can make that work. And she was like, oh, and then I felt so stupid that I'd asked for it. And I felt really bad. And I was worried I was a troublemaker. And I said, okay, if you went into Starbucks and said, hi, I really want a cappuccino with some oat milk. And the barista said, we're out of oat milk this week, how would you feel? Like, would you feel really stupid and really bad and like everyone was judging you and you should never have asked for that and you're being difficult and awkward? And she's like, no, I'd just choose another milk. Or like, it's not personal. I was like, exactly, and we have to take all these things because we're putting so many judgments and assumptions on ourselves all the time. And, probably with your friend and her sister-in-law, her sister-in-law probably would have been okay if you say, oh, do you mind actually if we just have 1 hour as a couple by ourselves, like to get some space, some breathing room. But people, I think, it's so easy to go and order a coffee and make all your sort of mini demands because they're not demands. It's like a very clear menu of options. You know what you have available, what you can kind of choose from, three sizes, whether it's takeout, having whatever, the kind of milk. But I think when it's something where it's like, I don't know if that's allowed, I don't know if that's on the menu to say, please don't come on this walk. And I don't know how the other person is going to interpret it. And I don't know if they'll think I'm being rude or if it's personal or if they won't mind. And I don't know if I'm just being mean if I say that or if that's okay for me to, there's so many things that this is all the kind of self-doubt because we don't have the clear parameters. And I think when you're little and you're trying to be good, often that comes from a place of behave this way so that you're liked, so that you're accepted, so that you're kind of palatable to other people and you're lovable and you'll get praise and you'll get attention and you'll be welcome. And that's something that we just start editing and editing and editing more as we get through life because we're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to upset anyone. So it's in the end, it's like, okay, then your friend is upset, not necessarily upset, but probably didn't have the walk that she was hoping for. And she won't just be doing that in that one area of her life. That will be every area that she's feeling unable to speak up and say, I wouldn't love it on this occasion if you joined us, or and actually if you went to a coffee shop and just said, oh, sorry, you put regular milk instead of oat milk, people would feel completely fine saying that because you're like, no, I asked for something else, or like that's not what I wanted, or and people are like, oh, okay, and it's such a clean transaction. And then yeah, in real life, I think people really struggle with that because it's like, what's the menu? What's the rules? Which rules have you got? I don't know if my rules are the same. I don't know how you're going to interpret them. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's that it's and a willingness to be really vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
And I think and what how will this person as you like the how will this person view me with asking
Mm,
for this need to be met or this request?
Yeah.
Um, and I remember, I forget when, when we don't ask, uh, we don't know if it's a no.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it also gives the other person an opportunity to share, say yes or no,
Exactly. Yeah.
and offers them an opportunity for growth because maybe it's an uncomfortable yes or no, but that allows
Mm.
room for expansion.
Yeah. And also, I think for me, I would be really upset if I thought that, somebody didn't say something in a workplace or relationship or whatever. So I thought that they were okay. And then they said, oh, actually, for 5 years, I've just been pretending that this, this thing you do makes me happy, but actually it really annoys me, or it really hurts my feelings, or it's really like not pleasant. And I would be like, oh, why didn't you just tell me? Because I would have just been aware of it, and I would have obviously been considerate. And I think that's where people get really scared as well with this thing of kind of, hey, I have my coaching program, Good Girl Goodbye, which is very much like get rid of this good girl voice in your head that's keeping you small and quiet and questioning. But some people are like, oh, well, I don't want to be bad, though. I don't want to be a bad person. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. It's just allowing you to be you, and that's not going to be a bad person. It's just going to be not a really edited, confined, kind of cut your corners off to fit a square peg in a round hole kind of person. And a lot of us are doing that or have done that at some point in our lives, and it never leads you to a place where you feel happy, because that thing of fitting in versus belonging that Brené Brown always says, it's like they're just wildly different. Fitting in is just you kind of pretending to be, a person, or what you think other people need. And belonging is really just, here I am, like warts and all, and just love me or leave me, I don't mind. But at least you know that people who love you or accept you or want you there 100% know what they're getting, because it's actually pure, authentic and that's just, it's not easy for people to show up in that space, and it feels very unsafe for a while if you don't have other people around you or support to say, like, that's okay, that's not wrong, and that's we've been there, like we've all kind of got through that journey, and actually I can guarantee you will always be happier on the other side of this when you're being true to yourself, because otherwise, whose life are you living, honestly?
Yeah, I know. I think that, and I don't know if you felt the same. I would almost feel like at times when I wasn't, for me, COVID was big. The masks were big. I wasn't doing them.
Mm,
And it was symbolically, it was like, okay, you're taking away my throat chakra, my ability to speak,
mm,
express my song. Um, I was very vocal about not wearing masks to the point that we created a, Hugs Over Masks group, and we
mm.
uh, protested in a sense, in the grocery stores with groups of us wearing no mask. And it wasn't easy,
Mm,
but I know that had I warned them,
yeah,
it would have been completely counterintuitive to everything that I am about. And
yeah,
know that if I had kept my mouth shut,
mm,
it also would have been suffocating,
yeah.
literally suffocating me. I mean, not only were they suffocating people, you know, and I had plenty of science to prove that they were not good for humans. But,
Mm,
but it wasn't easy doing it. It was not easy going into the grocery store
yeah,
and, no, I don't have to wear a mask. It's just a mandate. It's not a law. Like in here, I was explaining myself. Um, and so I only went to the places that I wasn't going to be harassed.
yeah. And what for you made it more worthwhile to be in the discomfort of, explaining yourself or feeling that way rather than the discomfort of conforming?
Uh, what made it more comforting?
What made it warm? Because I guess they're both
What
like
made it worth it?
discomforts. It's like, yeah,
Because
what
I
made you
knew,
choose that
because
discomfort?
if I had put it on, it would have felt like I was going against every
Mm,
cell in my body. And that was out of alignment,
yeah.
my truth. And I can't live like that.
No, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's when people really change, and they always say that's when the discomfort of going out of your comfort zone and trying
Yeah.
something new or making that change, that first step is always worth it when it's actually going to be even less comfortable to stay, doing what everyone else is doing or to stay where you are or where you don't feel happy and like stay in the room that isn't working for you. So at least kind of go wandering and try something else or try, doing what feels authentic or right to you.
Yeah.
And even if that will feel uncomfortable to start with, it will feel more comfortable than the discomfort of doing something that really goes against your whole being.
Yeah, and I think that's where you really have to listen to your well, intuition, but even your body. Like
Mm,
we have bodily sensations that tell us and are sort of our inner compass.
yes, exactly.
And when we aren't listening to those, they might start, I don't know. I think that's where body awareness is so important. Like, how do I feel in my body when I said yes, but I actually meant no? Like, what
Mm,
feeling constriction in my chest
mm.
and starting to be aware of those feelings. I dated this guy, I was moving in with him. Okay. Everything. Now, this was, and sometimes you learn this in hindsight.
Always in hindsight, yes.
Everything in my body said, this is a bad idea.
Oh
To the
no.
point that the day of the move wasn't packed. I was getting a U-Haul and I literally was like taking my arm and sweeping across the counter and just putting the stuff in boxes. But
Mm,
my body all up to that point was like, no, no, this isn't right. And I felt it. And I did
yeah.
it anyway. And 4 months later, I was moved out.
And then you kind
But
of realized that you
yeah,
like
but
had
I'm like, I knew.
mm,
And I felt it in my chest, in my gut, like my leg, like heavy. I wasn't getting up off the couch. Like when you start to pay attention, right, you can actually feel like, okay, this is in alignment with me. Oh, this isn't, and
yeah,
how are you feeling? And I think when you, like you were saying, right, it can bring on anxiety,
yeah, absolutely. Stress.
exhaustion,
Yeah,
stress.
yeah.
I would think even some disease and illness, auto
Mm.
conditions often.
Yeah, because the body keeps the score and it's kind of screaming out like, stop it, stop doing this to me. And actually, I was very ill before I left London. I had to have an operation because I was really unwell. And it was one of those things where I had to look back and think, I think this is me just pushing my body to try and be in a space, like in a city that didn't super light me up and to be doing jobs that didn't make me really happy, but really kind of going over and above trying to prove my worth and was like, well, if I do more, then I'll be promoted and I'll be paid more, or I'll get a better job that will give me the freedom and it will let me get more money. So I'll be able to get a better apartment or I'll be able to travel more in my 5 weeks of annual leave, whatever. And when I went to Argentina, every day I was there, I was like, oh, this just feels like I'm actually really alive and I'm living. Like my whole day feels like from start to finish as though I'm in it. And when I was in London, I was like, oh, I just feel as though I've woken up, gone like a little zombie on the train to work, And I was trying to change up different things. Like I'm going to walk to work and listen to like kind of manifesting podcasts or meditations, or, I'm going to do yoga and I'm going to kind of get extra hobbies and things but it was actually my body just being like, stop doing these things that make you feel unseen and overlooked, and just kind of repeating the cycle and going from job to job, just being like, oh, it's the same thing again, even though it's a global company, not a small startup, or it's like I've got, this industry of finance versus fashion or whatever. I was like, maybe I need something more creative. Maybe I was like, no, you just need to get out. And the big thing for me was that whenever I saw a film, like those cheesy Hallmark, like terrible ones,
Yeah.
when like the girl leaves the city and goes back to her small hometown, and then she's like finally free and falls in love or whatever. And I always used to watch those and see when they left the city for like whatever, they lost their job or something, and be like, I'm so jealous. Like that would feel amazing. Like imagine if I just had to leave London. And it took years before I was like, I wonder if I could just leave by myself. Like, I wonder if I don't have to be in like a horrific car crash or like fired from a job, or, do something. I was like, I wonder if I could just be a really good employee, full health, and be like, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. This makes me really unhappy and I'm choosing a different route. And then I'm a big person of no regrets, but that's one of the things that you were saying with hindsight. I was like, I listened to so many podcasts where, famous, successful people were saying that. They're like, I made all my great decisions by my gut. And it's like what feels right and there is something there. And the things that you notice in a film or in a song, or that make you cry, or, I remember watching that Disney film Soul. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that
It's
one.
actually so good, but it's basically the same thing of kind of everyone has a purpose that they have to fulfill in life, and they're all different. And it's like you won't be happy till you find your kind of little thing that's aligned with you. And I remember just sobbing at that, just watching it with like my goddaughter. It was like, this is a children's film. But it really got me, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm not aligned. I'm not doing something. And when I found coaching, and I was like, started getting into that space or that kind of tribe of people that were in a place of service and in a place of, empathy and caring and listening and wanting to help other people. And almost everyone who's found their way to coaching, therapy, counseling, all these things, like we've all had something kind of nightmarish in our past or different things along the way. No one's got there with a clean slate. um, and so that was just so refreshing. I was suddenly like, oh, I wasn't wrong all of these years, and I wasn't a misfit, or I wasn't, a problem. I was like, I just was around people who were really glorifying burnout, and they really were more than happy to basically put their lives on hold till 45, 50, and then be like, I've done it, I'm getting out, I'll take my money and leave. And I was just like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can get there. It's just like my body's not going to let me do it. And yeah, there's a huge part that if I was doing my life all over again, I would love to have been brave enough, like at one of the kind of earlier stages, to say, I can just actually pull myself out of this. I don't need like someone else to do that or give me that permission or that. But equally, everything happens for a reason, and all the experience I got now helps me so much with my coaching. But when I do this now and I talk to you or talk to a client, or I'm in a coaching panel or anything like that, I leave the calls and I feel like I've been plugged in and charging and like so energized, and I just feel like really kind of sunshiny and happy and overflowing with like all of this goodness, and like, oh, there's so much possibility and opportunity and everything's good. And it's just the complete opposite to how I used to feel when I left the office, which was like, oh, another day that's gone by in my life that I'll never get. And that's not to say I'm really not anti-corporate at all, because actually I think I could have made a lot of those jobs work if I had had the skills and tools that I have now, of being able to assert myself, or being able to ask for what I want, or just kind of know what I want and validate that for myself, and probably choose different jobs in the first place and different priorities and all these things. So yeah, that's something I'm also quite passionate about, is, I don't think people often do have to leave certain situations as a kind of like, run, get out, break free, because quite often it's like we can push this back, we can get these boundaries in place, we can make some really good positive changes. And unless it's a very toxic environment and you just need to get out of there, there's a lot of things that you can do, that make a change almost overnight. So
Yeah, I think so much of of our situations, as you mentioned, unless really toxic,
mm,
even, you know, like reflect on the relationship I had with their dad. Had I had different tools,
mm,
right? I mean, not even relationships don't necessarily have to end. So much of it comes back to our own personal work that could
yeah,
actually like shift an
yeah,
entire friendship or relation, right? But when we're not speaking up and we're not expressing that truth, and if we're coming from an intention of, right, of love, anything
mm,
we share, right? It's not, if it's coming in, and I think maybe delivery, but if it's
100%, yeah.
right, if that intention is still loving, the delivery is respectful and kind, and
Mm.
that all kinds of things can shift.
Absolutely. And I was giving this example the other day too, that I don't have any children of my own. One of my best friends, um, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was pregnant and then was kind of avoiding me. And then she said, "Oh, I want to tell you something, but I'm so sorry. I'm pregnant, and I know it's going to upset you." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm not upset for you. Like, I'm really happy for you, but I'm also allowed to sort of be upset for me." And that took a lot for me to have got to that point of like, I think I'm allowed to feel both of these things at the same time. And we just had a really good conversation, because I was like, I don't want to lose this friend. She was sort of like, "I'll see you in 9 months to a year. Goodbye." I was like, "No, I don't want this." And she just didn't know how to deal with it, and kind of, she was just so concerned that she was going to hurt me by, being happy herself. And I was like, "No, that's absolutely not true." I was like, "Give me like 3 to 5 business days. I'll just kind of process this, work it out myself." And I was like, I'll be back. And now it's like I'm godmother to her daughter and stuff, and it's really lovely. But I was so grateful that she kind of allowed me to have that conversation with her, because some people, I think, aren't necessarily open to that. They're just like, "Right, goodbye," if you're not really, exuberantly happy for me. And it's like, you have to understand that both people's feelings are valid, and that I can be really, really happy for you and sad for me, or vice versa. And, we can also, like, if I just explain to you it's not personal, and I know that you're not doing this in any way to hurt me, there's just like, let's just meet each other in the middle, talk about it. And she said that was really helpful for, she had some other friends who had issues having children and things. And she was like, "Oh, I was able to take that and understand, as well, how to talk to people." Because people don't explain these things. And unless you have those awkward conversations and then they work out well, then you're like, "Oh, I shouldn't say anything." And if I was doing the good girl version of me, I would have done what I did with my first few friends, which was like, "Okay, I'm so happy for you. Great, bye." And then they're like, "I don't think she is happy for me." But and it's just not the same. It's not healthy for both sides.
Yeah, so she gave you, right? But if she had withheld the information, she wouldn't have given you that opportunity for
Yeah.
that growth and expansion, and even to have that conversation with her. And you got to also share and show up in that vulnerable space of like, look, I can experience both.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think that's just, I mean, that's just my personal example, but I think there's so many things like that where it's worth having the slightly uncomfortable conversation. And it was very much in a tone like this. It was just like, "Look, this is sort of where I'm coming from. I also know where you're coming from. And I genuinely really am happy for you. I also just need some space to just like, I'm just today not going to be like extremely happy. I might accidentally cry, so
Right.
it's that kind of thing. But that was so much better than I was like, I do love you as a friend, though. I don't want to lose the friendship. I don't want to not be in your children's life or like, just as a cutting off. So things like that, just to be able to explain. And I was really grateful for her that she gave me the time and space to explain that, because I think that's something, if you've been invalidated for your feelings a lot, or if you say something and people just like, well, you just need to be happy, or you just need to toughen up or whatever, you're like, oh, okay, I just won't explain myself, or I won't say how I really feel, because that's going to cause trouble, or it's going to hurt someone, or it's going to be me being the problem again. It goes back into those good girl
Mhm.
beliefs. And so yeah, that's what I'm always saying, is like the good girl is this voice in your head that's basically like, don't say that, don't do that, that would be really naughty, that would be bad, like then they won't like, it's kind of all the self-doubt things. And it's really, she's like your bully, a bully in your head, she's like the mean girl at school. And it's really like getting rid of her, and so that you can just actually be you.
Be, yeah, who you are. So when working with clients, how how do you approach helping them step into their power and
Mm.
sort of release that bully uh,
Yeah.
in their head so that they can, feel confident in their communication and expressing their desires, their needs, asking for what they need, um,
Mm.
all that.
Yeah. So normally it's like I do a deep dive, which is a 90-minute call, or usually I do a 12-week program. They're both one-to-one coaching. I do some group coaching too, but mostly it's one-to-one. And it's very much like a tailored thing, because I didn't want to do a kind of like, here's my program, here are my fixed questions, go, because everyone is different. We're coming from different places. So even though it's the same theory, it's like someone might be really, really heavy on the perfectionism, and someone else might be really struggling with boundaries and setting them and maintaining them things. So it starts off kind of exploring that, like, where do you think your challenges are, and what do you know that you struggle with, or kind of get challenged by. And then once we start talking about all of those things, like observing and awareness, and kind of bringing that awareness to other things that are coming up and blind spots, and then very much understanding where that's coming from, like what that root cause is, and where that is all kind of feeding back into. And often it is these kind of childhood limiting beliefs that are kind of from between 0 and 7, but there'll be, formative experiences that any person has had that at some point is kind of solidified. And it's kind of getting to that point, being like, okay, you're not that person now, and how can we kind of make it safe for that little version of you, basically, that's like still running in this safety survival mode. But I mean, they're so ingrained, these are super subconscious things, so everyone's like, I don't think so, I don't think I do that. And then kind of by session 3, it's like, I just realized after our conversation, I said this to my boss, and I definitely do that thing that we were doing. It's like, oh, and there's a lot where I give coaching tools and kind of explain things. So like, I use a lot of analogies. So like with boundaries, I always say it's kind of like being on a tennis court and having the net down the middle, and any relationship of any kind that you're in, whether with a work relationship with a boss, or with a friend, or as a personal relationship with a partner, whatever, that net should be down the middle of the court, like 50% each. There will always be someone who's like a bit of a boundary pusher, who kind of picks up the net and pushes it into your area. And it's like, do you say, excuse me, I actually know I deserve 50% of this court, put that back and assert yourself and hold your boundaries and say, I feel comfortable with this, but not this? Or are you like, that's not very nice, please don't do that. And then they just do it more and more, and you kind of end up squashed against the wall, and they've got 90% of the court and you've got 10. And then, yeah, these are the situations where you have to kind of leave the tennis court because like the
Right.
boundary's gone. I've lost all control of this situation. So there's things like that where, yeah, I'll sort of explain coaching tools and like things to do and then how we communicate, or again, people will have different points that they are challenged by or struggle with, and so it's kind of coming up with different exercises, resources, ideas, and just a lot of it's like mindset reframe, and getting to a point where someone kind of has the manual to their own beliefs and behaviors and kind of understanding, like when you get an Apple laptop versus a original, IBM one or something, and it's totally different keyboard, and everyone's like, how do you make a hashtag? How do you do this stuff?
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't know. And it's kind of giving someone that manual to say, like, by the way, if you press this, this, and this, it will shortcut to this. And if you do this, and we all have like our own weird glitches in the code. So it's kind of finding out where that is and kind of updating your operating system, I guess, doing your system updates and getting to a point where it's yeah, you kind of feel able to have that freedom, trust your intuition, have self-worth, know that you actually deserve to, assert yourself, have your own feelings, validate your own feelings, so you're not constantly feeling like you need to be doing something to qualify for someone else to say, oh, well done, oh, okay, now you've done enough and now you're good enough and now you're this. That's a huge thing, is like feeling good enough just as you are, and feeling like you don't have to prove your worth, feeling like you don't have to be perfect to meet these insanely high standards. And I was talking to one client who was like, oh, if I'd done this 20 years ago in corporate, I'd never would have got on a plane with a migraine and flown 5 hours to a meeting that I could have taken on an online call, because I felt like I would lose my job and I wouldn't then get my promotion, my pay, and these kinds of things. That it's like the knock-on effect is so huge. And actually, when you just know that, oh, I could say, no, that isn't okay and I don't feel good, and actually there's another solution and it's totally reasonable for me to take this call online from my office, whatever. And being able to just stand up for yourself, basically. Yeah. And it's kind of getting into that freedom. So, for me as well, and I'm going between England and Argentina, they're very different cultural experiences. And it's very much like I am now at a point where I'm very unedited and unwavering. Like, I'm the same wherever I am, whoever I'm with, whatever I'm doing. I can bring these same kind of pressure proof traits where I'm like, I know who I am. I know in my core this, and I'm very able to say, I don't like this, and I do like this, and I don't want that. And that's, and I'm not the problem. I'm not being really difficult. If I have an allergy, I'm not going to eat the food anyway to be polite and make myself have an
Yeah.
allergic reaction, But people do things like that because they get nervous and they're like, oh, I just going to
Yeah.
leave it and eat the nuts. And it's like, don't, So yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is a journey. I
Yeah.
do think it takes time. I think many women and men, I do think I don't think we're meant to come out at 22 or
No.
19, right? With all of the knowledge and wisdom that,
No, of course, no. Life would be so dull, like if
yeah,
you were
if we just
and
came
and
out
too
already,
dark.
already knowing all this stuff, like it really
Yeah.
takes time to figure out that, um, there were things that I did along the way that were definitely swimming, what would be, swimming upstream, making some big decisions that people thought were like, what? Like, what are you doing?
Mm,
But I think it's a process.
yeah. And it has to be good for you, because if you were doing everything by the book, by this, old good girl rule book, and living a really miserable kind of half-baked life that you didn't enjoy and you didn't feel alive and present, and your body was ill, and your mind was ill, or all these things, because like we were saying, these things do manifest in different ways, and they kind of, your body is signaling like, stop it, please, get me out of this situation. And it's like you deserve to be in a full, happy, enjoyable life. And I'm not saying every day is going to be rainbows and sunshine and just no problems, and like, that's just not life. But I think as well, it's having that resilience and being able to build that, so that when things do glitch, that you can say, oh, okay, no problem. I know how to fix this. It's not going to just derail me, and my life isn't a complete failure. And if I make a mistake, I'm not going to be ejected from everything and everyone I know. And it's like, it's mistakes are just an opportunity for learning. And there's huge reframes in all of those sort of things, that growth mindset of like, you have to fail in order to succeed, because you have to learn and course correct. And as long as you are in a mindset of kind of curiosity and exploration, and like children are, where they're just like, oh, well, I fell down learning to walk, I'm going to get up and walk again. They don't say, that's it, I'll never walk, I'm terrible at walking, I should never have tried. They're just like, oh, well, because they don't have that shame and that guilt and that judgment and all those things programmed in. They're just like, I'm just trying, I'm trying to do it, and at some point I'll get there. And we really get that kind of battered out of us at some point as we're growing up. And it takes a lot to go back and kind of reclaim that and be like, actually, I think I'm good being just me. And I think that is enough. Well, I know that is enough. And if the people around you don't think that's enough, put yourself in some different groups and go and do the things you love and be in the places that light you up and make you happy. And you will find those people that agree with you and see the world in your way, and you know appreciate you for who you are and as you are. And that's just the best feeling in the world, to have that freedom of like, I just don't really care what other people think about the way I cut my hair or how I'm dressed today. Like, I'm not performing for anybody else. If I want to put makeup on and look nice for myself, I will do that. And if I want to go out with no makeup and whatever, also great. Like, I'll do that for myself. It's not to meet somebody else's approval and expectations. And yeah, because otherwise you would always be in a position of less power than that other person, if that's what you were trying to do all the time. So
Yeah,
so it's like,
the title of my podcast is Unapologetic Living, and I don't know if it's ever been mentioned in any episode, but my son, I posted a video on Instagram.
mm-hmm.
I was 21 at the time, and I was tongue scraping. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, yeah.
I do it every day. It is like the very first thing I do before I drink any water. I tongue scrape,
Mm-hmm.
I drink my water. And it was on Instagram. I was tongue scraping, whatever. Well, he was working with a basketball team. By the time
Okay.
he hears this, because he doesn't listen to my stuff, so. And all these other guys were like 20s. He texts me. I mean, I tell you what, he was like, Mom, you have got to take that video down. Guys on the team found this. They think it looks like you're sucking a dick. And I was like, son, I mean, we got a big fight over this.
I'm sure.
You better take it down. This is could potentially ruin my career. It's this all this like
Yeah,
what everybody thinks. He's 21, right? I'm thinking, okay, this is your
yeah.
brain at 21.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 45. I'm not taking it down, son.
Yeah,
But it was like, and so he was kind of encroaching in my space.
yeah.
Hey, if you don't take it down, I'm not coming to see you. Well, I'm not taking it down. So we're going to go and have a conversation with a counselor about this.
Okay.
So he comes to town, everything's fine. And I take him to this counselor and we talk about it,
Mm.
which was great.
That's so open-minded. I love that.
And I said, if you were asking me to take down some of my holistic, you know, messages out there, what have you, it's like me asking you to quit talking about basketball.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
would that feel? And so we were able to come to this space of like true
Mm,
understanding. I mean, that's just water under the bridge now, but it gave me the name for my
I
podcast.
love that.
I have had my microphone for almost 3 years. I still haven't used it yet, but he said, you can keep, I love you. You're so out there. All he wanted me to do was conform his entire life. Why
Yeah.
can't you be normal? Well, you didn't pick normal. You pick parents because I believe parents choose their children for the growth they need this life in their
Hmm.
in this lifetime. And I was like, that's not what you picked.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can keep living your unapologetic life, but we're not going to follow each other on Instagram. So that's our thing, right?
That's your boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. We have this so much. I'm like our whole relationship shifted too, right? In such a better, like,
Mm,
we've set boundaries. There's no more concern. No one's shutting down their voice.
yeah.
And that's where I got the name. I was like, oh my gosh. Like I wrote it down right away. That's the name of my podcast.
Like, thanks, son. That's great.
And, you know, and I want him to live unapologetic level,
Of course. Yeah.
unapologetically. Like live
Yeah.
your truth, follow your dreams, like be able to get in touch with what that stuff is for you. And I know it takes time. And I'm sure when he looks back when he's 40, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I told my mom to take that video down, right? But at 21, you're still in this like mindset of like caring so much about.
Yeah. He was coming from a place of fear,
Yeah,
basically.
fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you
Yeah.
realize, like, when you really look and dig deeper, that it is so much, oftentimes, fear.
Mm. But I think the same when I was, I mean, very different thing, but when I was saying, I think I'm just going to go to Argentina, and everyone was like, no, you don't do that. That would be really stupid. Like that could be very dangerous. And actually what I wanted to do was I was like, I'm going to learn to play polo. And I was like, but you don't really ride here. You've never played polo in your life. You don't know anyone that plays polo. You can't be a professional player. I was like, I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to go and do something like so insane and so different and so new and fresh and just start as a beginner and challenge myself. And I don't care if I'm obviously like not a professional polo player in any way. But I was like, I just want to go and like experience another culture and try something that I can if I want to. And it was really like it took a lot, and it sounds silly because now everyone's like, oh great, I always knew that you would make your dreams come true. It's like, did you? Because there was a lot of resistance, and I was like, I actually had to be incredibly strong to say I'm going to do that anyway.
Yeah.
And I think probably people thought it was defiant or thought it was having a breakdown or whatever, but I was like, actually for me, like I don't want to stay where I am in the job that seems secure but is crushing my soul. And I don't want to be in the city that isn't really lighting me up, even though other people around the world love London and I can appreciate it for what it is. Like it's an amazing city for sure, but I was like, it's not doing anything for me. I'm just like, yeah, it's nice. The end. Like I don't feel, whereas I go to Buenos Aires and I land and I'm like, I'm back and I'm alive and I'm kind of like where I'm meant to be, you just feel like a completely different
Yeah.
feeling. And it's like that's, I was always like that's like the great love of my life or something, because it's like that feeling of like I really it lights me up talking about it. And it was just more like I'm going to go and be me and do that thing because I don't want to, I've done the being the good girl thing and look where it's got me. Like not to any of the places that I really wanted to be by the time I was 31. I was like, I didn't want to be feeling that way. And I don't want to be feeling like, is this it for the rest of my life? Like, is this as good as it gets? Because I would be really sad if it, And also it's like, what's the worst that can happen if I go and I hate it? Like it's only me that's got to deal with that consequence, like no one else. Like it's that will just be notched up to experience. It turned out, obviously, I loved it and that's great. But you
Yeah.
have to really ask yourself these questions at some point of like, am I just kind of, snoozing my way or like sleepwalking my way a little bit through life? Like you said, when people are kind of like, yep, I need to do this in this order by this date and da 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 da. And then you're like, why? And that's not necessarily because it's bad. Like some people are really, really happy with their life working out at that, and that's great. And I sometimes really wish I was that person because life would have been so much easier. But I'm also like, I'm really so thrilled that I'm not that person because now I get to go and help all the other people who are also not like that. And, I think there's secretly a lot more people out there that just don't realize it. Yeah. So
I
that's what I'm here to do.
I think so. I think they are. And I think so much of it's about kind of I don't know, undoing that, right? Like being able,
Yeah, like the deprogramming.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to deprogram. I think that there's probably a lot of people, and I say this, I do spend a lot of time, not ton, I mean, way less time, but I do drive Lyft and Uber, so I talk to a lot of people.
I love that. One of my
And
favorite conversations when I'm in a taxi. I love that.
yeah, and I'm a body worker too, so and I see a lot of build a lot of regular connections, but when
Mm,
I get to be in the Uber, right, and I'm talking to my passengers, like I hear it.
yeah,
Lives half lived
yeah,
because of whatever reason. And there's various reasons.
yeah. It's like a battery that's just kind of
Yeah.
drained, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and this I don't know, like right now, and I know we've been talking for a while and I want to honor your time, but like I don't know if have you seen this book? I just found this one.
No, but that looks
It's
awesome. I'm going
oh
to
my
write that
gosh,
down.
it really
The
is.
Awakened Woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard about it. I'm 47 and I'm heading into, well, I'm like in the throes of perimenopause. It's coming for you. And I didn't really think it was coming for me. And I'm at
Mm.
44. I'm like, oh, man, this is the best year of my life. And at 40, I'm like, oh, things are changing. One of her questions here is like, when you go and are heading, especially in the book that I heard about this one from is the wisdom of menopause, is like so much takes place in a woman's life and head
Yeah,
into this transition. And a lot of times, like kids leave women, right? They leave the house
yeah,
at that time. A lot of women, well, they're rebirthing as a woman who is no longer fertile, right?
yeah,
Losing that piece. A lot of times, women in menopause lose parents. That's typical, around that age.
yeah.
So there's a lot of death,
A lot of grief. Yeah,
a lot of grief,
yeah.
and and a lot of women. That's actually when they like kind of enter out into the world with their gifts and their purpose.
Totally. Yeah. It's never too late. It really,
Right.
really isn't. Because you're going to be a year older anyway, and you're going to be 47, whether you like go and pursue your dreams or not. You're going to be 48 the following year, so when sometimes people are like, oh, well, if I start a degree now, I won't get my degree till I'm 50. It's like, do
Okay.
that because if you start it next year, you'll be 51 and then 50, like you're not going to be reversing time. So it's like, what's the point in waiting, And it's not too late. There's so many famous people in history who have
Huh.
started things way later than, there's like freaks that do something when they're 16, 17, and they're like amazing, amazing. That's great. But loads of people, like it takes the life experience and that path and all the little, things that happen and don't happen and the mishaps and all the things along the way to get to that moment where you're like, oh, it's all come together. I've got all my pieces of the jigsaw now. And like this is the final piece. And then it's like it goes, and it's really cool.
So before we conclude, I am curious, with working with these clients, would you
Mm.
say there is an average age range?
I'd say probably women in their late 20s to early 30s are kind of awakening to it. They're at like
Uh-huh.
something's off. And I think I think they kind of have these awarenesses that like stuff isn't feeling right, but they feel like it's again a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of like it's me and it's I'm the problem and I'm just got to kind of accept this. And there's a big piece of kind of what I have to do is like kind of make people aware of like this is what you have, or this is kind of not what you're feeling. I'd obviously never tell someone that, but just kind of putting the information out in different ways for people to be like, oh my gosh, that sounds really like me. And sometimes people are like, no, I'm not stressed, I'm not anxious, I'm fine. And then you say, oh, do you ever think this? Or do you ever feel like, oh, I can't stop because everything would end and like then all my stuff I've done before would be a waste. And people are like, oh, that does sound like it's like,
Yeah.
yes, you do have these things. And it's kind of getting to that point where it's like the awareness and then the acceptance and then the action. So it's that those kind of three steps. So I'd say, yeah, late 20s, I think people are coming off the tail end of like you can smooth over the cracks with some partying and like life's all good and stuff. And then life just starts getting a bit more serious at 30, whether I mean, I found this, I felt like I was on a good night out at the party, and it's as though everyone just kind of left one by one, and I didn't really notice. And then suddenly someone turned on the lights and was like, go home. And I was like, oh, where's everyone else? I was having a really good time. And life kind of changes whether you are on that train or not, because
Yeah.
it does. And people are settling down, or people move for jobs, and jobs become more serious, and people start
Yeah.
wanting to do well in their career. It's not just things. So, and families and children and all those things, it changes dynamics and stuff shift. So I do think sort of, yeah, late 20s people are aware, and early 30s I think people start to be like, I need to do something about this because I do not like the way my life is going. But that being said, there's also people any time between there and kind of, I'd say 40, mid 40s, because I think at that point, like you said too, women get to that point where you're like, amen, but you just really don't care as much about what other people think. You do become a bit more able to be comfortable in your own skin. I think you on some level accept yourself, whether everyone else does or not, whether you feel like. But yeah, I think it's sometimes just getting to that thing of like, I could change this and not feel, not kind of suffer with this or suffer in silence or struggle alone. Or I think my biggest thing I would have loved 10 years ago is for someone to say, you are not the only person that feels this way. You are not the only one. And you're not alone in this world with this, because that is how I felt. And that was really, really scary. And I do think that the world has changed in a really good way in terms of mental health conversations are opening up. I think we have a long way to go on it as well. But there's a lot with all of that where it's like these are problems that a lot of people are facing and just getting on with, and they don't have to. You don't have to struggle with that by yourself. So I'm here to
I
to
love
help.
I
Yeah.
love your work. Where can people connect with you?
Yes, so Instagram, Good Girl Syndrome Coach. My website is www.goodgirlsyndromecoach.com. I've got things on LinkedIn, and that's just LinkedIn/ Good Girl Syndrome Coach. So basically, I think like Threads, YouTube, Facebook, all of it is all the same thing. And then you can take the quiz. I have a Good Girl quiz that's 50 questions or kind of statements, thoughts, ideas of typical things that will go through the head of someone coming up against some good girl syndrome. And it's to kind of go through and see how many of those see what your score is out of 50. And then also book a free assessment call. It's no obligation, 15 minutes. We can chat, see if I'm the right coach for you or not. And then decide how I can support you in any way. So there's the deep dive, which is 90 minutes, or the 12-week one-to-one program, and I can do that online. So wherever I am in the world, I can I can connect with people. But yeah, but if you have questions, if anyone has questions, you can just message me, like DM me on Instagram or whatever. So drop me an email. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of I guess well with COVID, more and more work is
Mm,
virtually, which is great. I've met some awesome people through the internet.
yeah.
COVID, I didn't spend as much time, like I mean I did, but didn't, and now I have met just some amazing people and have had some amazing conversations.
Such a gift. Yeah. I was so happy to see your message the other day. I was like, yes, this is brilliant. Love to chat. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And all those links will be listed in the show notes below. And that quiz is free. Is that
Yep. Free quiz. Yep.
just right on the
Yes.
website?
Yep. There's a link in Instagram and in the website as well. There's links all over the place. You'll find them. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really, really enjoyed it.
I love
Thank
what
you.
you're doing. It fits right in with living an unapologetic life. I mean, you have to
100%.
remove that good girl. I
Get
mean,
her out of your head. Yes.
yeah, yeah. And what society or, whatever has deemed good girl.
Yeah. And it's just like write your own rule book. And that can be, for things that to be that person that you always wanted to be. You don't have to go into a witness protection program to be the person that you want to be. It's like you can start fresh at any time. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.